as far as the functionality.
Which is the hardest part.
I can't imagine just taking one class every day.
Yeah, I just got it set up this week. Yeah, that feels like a very
I just took it in.
All right, hey everybody, we're gonna go ahead and get started. A few announcements beforehand. If you need to pay membership dues or the studio tour fee and or both, it's off at some point tonight. I should make lists before we start this because I'm supposed to be saying. Our next meeting.
Sign up for your parking.
Yes, parking. There we go. If you have, I tried to catch everybody. If you didn't register your vehicle with the parking, yes, there's the QR code right there. They drive around apparently now with a truck that scans your license plate, and if we are not in there, you will get issued a ticket. So I'm going to try to make sure that I think we can get those for every meeting, and I'll from now on just hopefully send them out right beforehand. Ashley, as you walk in, did you do your parking?
I did.
Okay. I don't want anybody to get a ticket tonight.
Stick
it to the door.
Instagram, you put an announcement on the Instagram. That's how I found out.
Yeah, Instagram, email, Facebook. I tried. Signs.
Yeah,
so,
good job.
anyway.
Very good job.
Whew, it was hard to get an answer. I knew it would take the whole month to get the answer, and I got it yesterday. So, it's just how it works. So anyway, yes, and then for next month, our meeting won't be until a little bit later. It'll be on the third Tuesday, the 16th, because we're having Sarah Anderson, who is from Indiana, will actually be in the area doing some workshops at I Have the Dog and Round Rock, but she's going to do a demo for us with Sgraffito on our meeting, and so our meeting will be then, and then the studio tour is that weekend thereafter, or that weekend, the 20th and 21st. Let's see here. Anybody else have announcements? Shows or?
There's this really awesome ceramic tour going on in April.
Yeah, that. I am giving a demo at Enkindle Studio, which is in Jonestown on Friday. I think there's still spots available, so I'm pushing that as myself. So, yeah, I think that's it.
There's an open studio tour in San Marcos coming up.
Oh, that's right, there is.
But it's everything.
Okay.
But it's kind of like the open studio here in the fall.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. All right. So our artist this month is Margaret. I'm going to let you kind of obviously talk about yourself. She's got some slides for us, and then she's got some demo stuff for us. So, without further ado.
Where starts back here. Let me get out of the way.
You can just use the arrow keys on there to advance.
So yeah, that's me. I'm Margaret Henkels, and I have been working with clay. I've been in love with clay for a long time. When I got out of college, I was living with a guy who was a musician, and he had a band, and they practiced in the afternoon. And I was working part-time, so I thought, I have to do something besides part-time, because I can't be in the house all the time. And so I made a list of things that I would like to learn and do. And I was an English major in college, so it had to be something that didn't have to do with me being good with words. So I was going to learn how to take pictures, get a camera, take apart a car engine, put it back together. I'm sure there was a list of 5. Learn how to make pots. But the first thing that happened was I walked down the street. I was in New York City in the Village, and I walked down to Baldwin Pottery, where they had a pottery studio and kilns and classes, and I said, I only have $100. Could I give you my $100 to learn how to throw and do work exchange? And so Judy Baldwin, who ran that pottery, had a graduate of Alfred, said, sure, you could babysit my 2 boys. So I said, great. And so I started to make pots, and I've been making pots ever since. And so I thought what I would do would be to talk a little bit about show you a little bit about how I got from here to there. And so I used to throw on a wheel, and I was very intrigued and enamored and just dazzled by the fascination of learning how to throw. And so this was an early-ish presentable pot. It didn't look like this at the beginning. That I made in 2 pieces, and it was cone 6 and it was electric. And I was trying to think about how to have the symmetry of the wheel, but also have a little bit of life in the pot aside from its wonderful symmetry. So I would do a little bit of poke on the inside or make the rim a little uneven. And then that's another piece that's from that period of time, and I was assembling pieces, making a large bowl and a cylinder and then throwing them together. And so this piece was big for me at that time, sort of, and you know, the craziness of the wheel and the bowl wanting to go like this, you know, it's a little out of control, and then the bottom is a little more foundational, and it's also cone 6. And so I was making them in series, which I still do quite a bit, and I was thinking about them as water catchers. And so here they are on the roof of my building in New York, filled with water. And then I went into another sort of period of thinking, I really don't know what to do with the surface of my pieces. Not so content with the cone 6 electric. And so what if I make the forms as interesting as I can and then do sawdust firing? And so this piece, you know, that's one thing with photography, you really can't tell how big it is. And I try, when I take pictures of my pieces, especially my small ones, to make them look monumental. So I sort of feel as if, where did we get to think that it had to be big to be strong? So, but this piece, you know, I'm fond of it and I like the picture, but the piece itself is only about that big. And so then I decided that I needed to do something to get my pots out into the world. And I connected to a guy at the pottery that I was working at, and we decided that we would market each other's work. And that kind of led to us collaborating on a line of work. And I threw the pieces, and he's my husband. Would paint on them. And so we developed a line of work that was functional and sort of showy. So this platter is probably, 20 inches. And it kind of, as you can see, has a lot of control in the way that I threw it, and then kind of random in the way he would tear tape and stick it down and paint the black underglaze on and then pull it up and then use stains to fill in those kind of raggedy gaps. And so that was a white earthenware and fired to 04. And so that was another iteration of that. It was probably a cylinder that was 16 inches. Done the same sort of way. And at that time, we applied to be part of the National Craft Showroom, which was an outfit in New York for maybe 5 years. This must have been in the 80s. And so you could have your work in this showroom. And so we had a few different lines. There was a bowl, a vase, a plate. And buyers from all over the country would come to the furniture district in New York and place orders with different craftspeople. And so, we could sell to Bloomingdale's or Neiman Marcus or who knows? And it was kind of exacting. I mean, it was fun to be having orders and actually selling work, and they did a great service because you would ship off the order to Bloomingdale's or wherever it was, and once they had the UPS slips, they paid you. You didn't have to deal with Bloomingdale's, or you weren't dealing with the money side, you were just doing the making. And so that was really an exciting thing. We thought we were going to really, be potters for the rest of our life and send our kids to college. We don't have kids, so that didn't end up being a worry. But the thing about it was that it was also a little bit constraining. I felt as if each bowl had to be just like the other bowl. And sometimes that didn't happen. And so I eventually started to, with the ones that were not going to go as part of the line, I eventually started to attach slabs on the side. Sort of thinking, I'm always thinking with these slabs, which I still use, I want to be able to show that the pot is still in motion even though it's not on the wheel anymore. And so somehow or other, the use of the additional stuff helps me make, here's the direction we're going. I don't know. I can't explain it, but that's why I do it. And so then they got a little wilder and more interesting, I thought. And so I eventually sort of said to each other, this is not as much fun as we thought it was going to be. Let's not do that anymore. And so I just started making pots that I felt like making. And so this is like fast forward 30 years or whatever. This is a piece that I made here. And I work in slabs almost always. And I try to see what I can do. If I fold the slab, what happens? Now, one of you, or maybe most of you, could sort of say, if I take this piece of paper and I fold it this way, I know what's going to happen. My brain doesn't work like that. So I roll a slab and I do something and I'm like, oh, look at that. What am I going to do with it? And so in this case, I was trying to think about what happens when the base of the piece is also part of its decoration. So I would take a slab and fold it, attach it, and then add another one and see how much motion and excitement I could get going through the use of additions and a very simple form as the core. And so I made that one with the idea that it could sit that way, or it could be tipped and sit on its slabs. And this particular piece combines a couple of things that I use. I have a Majolica glaze that I use from Andrea Gill's recipe, and I had a glaze kiln in one time and the kiln underfired. And so the pieces that were glazed with the Majolica came out looking all crusty and dry, as you can imagine. And I thought, well, what would happen if I painted with stain on the Majolica and then fired it up to temperature? Would I still see those crackles? And I do. It's sealed over, it's food safe, but you can see that there's a sort of crackly pattern on the surface that's kind of interesting and kind of random. I mean, I like firing in my kiln at home and I like electric, but it's so controlled. So I like the fact that this, where the glaze overlaps, the crackle's a little different. Where there might be some stress in the clay, the crackle's a little different. And then I also thought, what the heck? I'm not selling dinnerware. I'm not completely happy with what happened with this piece. And so the outside of the piece is has like a terra sigillata red on the outside. and a Majolica on the inside, and it's kind of nice when it came out. But I thought, you know, it's not really sizzling. And so I started to say, well, you know, what if I use paint on the outside? And I probably did that too and didn't tell you on that one. That one is white terra sigillata, gray terra sigillata with, along the rim, there's a red oil stick, and then on the edges of that slab that's on the left, there's a black oil stick. And I sort of thought to myself, well, you know, the Greeks did it. I mean, why not? And, you know, I like the tradition and the rigors of clay and the rules that we all learned, but, you know, we don't have to obey them. And so this was just another, I probably stuck these in a little bit out of order, but I did do a fair amount of raku. When I first got to Austin, I was working at the Laguna Gloria Pottery Studio. They used to have an open studio when there were no classes, and so I did a whole bunch of pinch pots with slabs to put the pinch pot on a pedestal. And I like the randomness of that surface. And I also do have a strong affection for making things that work. You know, I like making a cup. I can't necessarily say that I could ever be a production potter where I'd make good mugs day after day after day and still have them be lively. But I'm interested in the cup and saucer, so this is, you know, me and my cup and saucer. And that's just, what if we put a ball on a slab piece that has slab support that's on a pedestal? And I'm interested in the whole problem about the pedestal. You know, how does the pot relate to the ground? You know, is it, I mean, we all pay attention to the rim, right? We have to pay attention to the rim, that's the horizon. But, you know, how does the pot rest on the ground, and does it have any spring? And so that's thinking about that. And then I decided that really it was time for me to buckle down and see if I could make some pieces that I could put in my shop on my website. And so I made a small box. It's small, it's quite, but it was sort of, how can I make a slab box with a lid that fits and has, you know, a secret area inside that honors the history of sort of terracotta, red clay, low fire, but, you know, sort of art. So, you know, do whatever. And so that's what I do now on my web shop. I try to make small boxes that are interesting, that look different from every angle, and that, again, have that sort of, I mean, this is a piece only this big, but it has a sort of monumental presence, I think. I think it's sort of, at least I hope it's sort of saying, I'm not just a small thing, I am a small thing with a big impact. That's another one. I do work in both, a kind of combo of, there's this piece on the bottom has the crackle Majolica, and then the top half is black underglaze, and I don't so much use the oil sticks as I used to, unless I'm in a pinch. But, you know, this is just that underglazed chalk stuff that comes like a pastel. And hopefully it has a slightly architectural quality. You know, it's a building with a roof and something on the roof so you can pick the roof off. And that is a terracotta piece that's about this big, and it has white terra sigillata and glazed pencil. And then when it came out of the kiln, I was like, oh, need a little something around the edge. So that has black oil stick. And that, you know, has to dry, and then I spray it with fixative. And this piece is a similar little box with a Majolica on the bottom, the black underglaze, the top half, and then some underglazed chalk. And then I decided that enough with the little boxes and the shopping, because I will tell you, as approachable and user-friendly and not intimidating as I find these little boxes, they do not sell like hotcakes. First of all, they're a lot of work, so they're expensive. And so I like to have an inventory of those because people do buy them occasionally, and you know, there's a studio tour coming up and people might buy a box. But then this summer I just decided, what the heck, if I like working big, why don't I just work bigger? And so I started to make some pieces that I think, you know, maybe they're like boulders. They're not huge. They're maybe, you know, my kiln is only about 18 inches tall, and so it can't be gigantic. But again, I am trying to think about assembling something that can be mysterious and have a strong impact, but isn't necessarily going to be used for anything except to amuse you. And so that's another one. And what I'd like to do, and it's kind of a hard thing to do, is to make these pieces that look as if they're going to just fly off. And to do that, to come up with a pot that has a bottom that goes like that, is a little bit challenging in that gravity is not on your side. You know, gravity means that that base wants to go brrr and crack off. And so you have to do a certain amount of building it in and then turning it upside down. But that's, again, fired to 04. And I use a raku clay because it cracks less. And I use a black underglaze on the inside and outside. And then there's an old raku glaze Kaiser matte that I've kind of tweaked to go to 04. And I put it on top. And of course, it's too big for me to dip. And if I dip it, I have like kind of a big tub. I dip it and it goes halfway, and then I turn it upside down. And so it doesn't go all the way. I can't cover the whole piece, and I haven't decided to go buy a deeper tub. And so I get out my trusty chalks, my underglazed chalks, and scribble on them, and then I spray it with a clear glaze. That's another, that same series. And then because you'll see as I work, I'm always waiting for the next piece to be ready. You know, I'm building a little box over here and it's not ready for its lid, so then I start over. So I always have a few things going at once. And I made these pieces where this is two pieces. The bottom is the dark piece is like a little brick that I made. And so I started making these pieces on the top that look sort of like boats a little bit from that series of what happens if the bottom's not flat, what happens if the thing's going to float away. And so I made a bunch of those and I kind of like them. And then when we had the studio tour, I pulled out everything that I have ever made in my life. And I had been making those top pieces, those bottle boats as I call them, and I had a series of them, and I just happened to put one thing on top of the other, and I just think that that is the coolest thing ever. I mean, the profile of it, you know, the fact that there's this edge and that space and that space, I don't know, I just think it makes the whole piece to have it on this pedestal. That's my latest craze. Similar. I made the top, it sat around for a year, I made another base. And that's my studio. So it all goes on at once. I have a nice little studio behind my house, and lots of pieces in process at one time usually. And so, you know, every morning I just go down and see what's next. And it's a great way to live. So let me show you how to, oh, do you have questions about this in particular?
I'm just curious on the photo, you've got things hanging from the ceiling.
Oh, you know, well, the chain is, those windows are square windows and they open in. And so there's a loop of chain that's going like that. And I can go like this and detach it. And when it's detached, it's just two pieces of chain hanging down. And I can pull the window in and hang it. And so that's what keeps it open. Did that answer your question?
What are the sacks?
Oh, I thought it would be fun to do something with leaves and the newspaper. And so that's what it is. It's like a little sculpture. I'm sort of interested in drifting out of clay a little bit into sculpture, but I'm not quite sure how to do that. And so the way that it happens usually is kind of around the yard. Something will happen. So I had the people next door to me built this huge new house recently, and they built a big, tall fence between. And I'm down the hill, so the fence got taller, sort of in my world. And so I had some springs that it must have come out of a car or something. And so I made, in order to have the vines that I was going to plant something to cling on to, I started hanging these springs. They're like that. And then I also have rocks that are suspended also for the vines to climb up. So it's sort of, I don't know what I'm doing. And but I feel as if I have something in my studio that I might want to play with, I can do that. And that's as far as I get toward making sculpture, but it amuses me, and I'm always finding some little something that, like I have, my studio is, well, I have a porch, and it's a wraparound porch, and I have trees behind my house, and between, when the leaves are off, the people in the apartments behind me can see right into my porch. And so I thought, well, I'll make a screen, and I have all these leftover Christmas balls, and so I strung, sort of, I feel as if I'm allowed to do whatever takes my fancy. And then I have a fairly disciplined clay practice that I do, but around the edges, I like to noodle around with leaves in plastic sacks.
In your earlier pieces, what were you burnishing with?
I didn't burnish. I was lazy when I did sawdust. I just let the chips fall where they may, and so the throwing line showed it. And so I would just stick the pieces in, and the fire would do what it did.
I guess maybe it was a terracage piece after that I thought maybe you burnished. No? Wow, renegade.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so let's get to the fun part. I mean, that was fun for me.
For anybody that came in after the fact, did you not pay for parking? Did you register for parking? Okay. Just checking.
Yep, you're fine.
I don't have a slab ruler, because I don't have room for one.
All right.
So I'll show you how I make a slab. It's kind of fun.
What clay are you using?
I use Longhorn Red. And then for the bigger pieces, the ones that I think look kind of like boulders, I use record clay now because it cracks less. And so those pieces are, technically under fire. I mean, they wouldn't really hold water, but nobody's going to ask them to. So I just, and I'm giving it a little bit of a toss. Maybe you guys do this already, but it makes my life kind of simple. And so I toss it, and then I turn it. And I'm really, as I toss it, it's stretching. So there's a limit to how far it will let me do that before it wants to tear. So then, I forgot to ask if there's a roller.
I know, I know. I'm so impressed.
I see one right under slabs.
I knew there was sort of something.
Oh,
thank you.
Making sure that. That's not I do it like that. Never is that
I wanted to show you this part just because, as I say, a lot of what I do is move from one thing to another while I'm waiting for the first thing to dry a bit. So, this is pretty soft, and so I'm just going to roll it. And I'm not a perfect roller, so I will check myself. And I'm not going to do quite as much. I'm not a perfectionist, but I'm going to be a little less so. But let's say I wanted, this is a little box that I'm going to work on, and I need a slab that's going to be kind of like that. So I'm going to cut along here and see how I did. That's pretty even. Good job. That's good enough. Okay. So let's say we want a box that's going to be 6 inches tall.
Are you starting at 6 inches, or is it gonna shrink down to 6 inches?
I'm starting at 6.
Okay.
But somehow or other. And I'm not, I'm a fairly precise person when it comes to language, but in general, I'm not a very precise person. So I sort of have to be as fastidious as I know how to be, because I know things are going to get messy later. And so one of the ways I'm going to be a little fastidious is the edges. So this is a little soft, and so I'm not going to be able to be too fastidious, but I'm going to always soften the edge a little, so that when I have my piece, you know, just like when you're throwing a piece, you always want to be able to have the rim be thick and smooth, or at least sturdy and smooth. So here, it's about how big I want my little box to be.
What's your knife?
I
saw you looking.
You read my mind. Can't have too many knives. So you guys probably know all about this. How many people throw? And so how many work with slabs? Oh, so you all know all of it. Okay.
Great. I wanted to see that.
So anyway, this is gonna determine the shape of my box. And I don't necessarily need this much sticking out, but I wanna know what's the shape gonna be like this way. So if I did this, that would be a little bit similar to this, which is sort of what we're going for. So this is very soft, and usually what I would do would be, I'd let this set up for several hours so it's a little easier for me to handle it. But for the sake of argument, we'll just do what you expect, which is gonna go like that. And you know, you can have any shape you want for this oval, but you want it to be you want there to be some feeling of tension in the curve and some feeling of elegance. So that's up to you. And then you're going to do the usual, which is figure out where they're going to join, and then score them.
Did you say you do everything in 04?
I do.
So nothing higher than 04? Wow. Is there a reason?
It's sort of the materials I have. I mean, this earthenware clay gets nice and mature, holds water, does whatever, at that temperature. And so, yeah.
Lowers your power bill.
It's not too bad. Okay, so then what we're doing here is squishing this together. And you want to be sure that you've squished it together better than you think you have to. And so sometimes what happens to me is
you know how, you have a piece that you're throwing on the wheel and then you leave the throwing lines because you think they're pretty. Sometimes you don't, but some people do. I sort of feel like if I go like this and squish this seam together, in order for it to be good and stable and have integrity, I don't mind that I have this mark here. I mean, there might be a way to do it without that, but I mean, I sort of don't mind that. So I'm not going to worry, and it makes it strong. So there you have the beginning of your little box. Squishy as it is. So this one I started yesterday, and it's dry enough that I can handle it. It's dry enough that I probably can do a little bit of work here to smooth out that seam a little bit, and if I've got any little nicks, I can do that, smooth them out. I am devoted to my rib. And so I see that I have this base, which I rolled out ahead of time, but I got a few little marks on it. So I'm going to erase those. As much as I can.
I would never have thought of using a metal rib for smoothing like that. I thought we'd be introducing more marks.
It has to be pretty flexible. So can I cut on the surface?
Yeah.
So I have this thing, very firm, and makes it easy to handle, and so I'm gonna put it, this thing needs a floor. And so I'm gonna cut around. Now, if the floor is pretty soft, I could almost cut through with my pin tool. This is a little bit firm, so not too much, but I'll do what I can with my pin tool.
Is there a reason why you don't cut the base earlier on?
You mean
when it's not as dry?
Oh, no. I would see how I can kind of go like this. I prefer, this is a little dry, because it's easier to clean up if it's a little softer. This just happens to be, the game that, it got a little dry. But, you're right, it would be easier, and it would be easier to join them.
So that is your preferred dryness, kind of like that medium leather hard?
Yeah, it was really a matter of me trying to get things to be ready on time for here, and so it got a little away from me. But it seems to be working fine. Maybe I'll do this instead next time.
you also use your metal rib to smooth out the like middle part, not the base, but like all the edges?
I always use the metal rib to smooth that out, and then I use my finger, and I do it one way, and then I turn it. Eventually it gets to be a nice little rounded thing, but yeah.
The piece that's drier just looks a lot sharper than the piece you just recently folded.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't, because it was so squishy, I didn't really smooth it out. But yeah, good point. I always smooth all of it with a rib, except sometimes the inside. Because there's only so much one woman can do, but if no one is seeing the inside, ever, I will not smooth it. But if it's like the inside of this, yeah, I smooth it. And so, because this is a little bit dry, and yeah, it looks like I smoothed the outside of this floor nicely, but the inside is a little, anyway, too late. But because it's dry, extra important to do the scoring. Even though the scoring is super boring, it has its reason.
So you're not using vinegar or slip or anything to chip on?
I just use water. I would be happy if somebody could show me that really slip is better. And so if the water I use is a little bit more like slip, fine. If it's like water, that's fine. I don't notice, I mostly have cracking that has to do with either gravity fighting me or drying it too fast. Or not squishing it together well enough.
Yeah, because the corners are going to dry a lot quicker
Mm-hmm.
in those pieces.
And I sometimes feel like, the pieces the different elements need to catch up with each other. So I'll slow dry something. If this is a little bit wetter than this, I'll cover it extra because I feel like sort of by osmosis eventually it evens. I hope that's true. Okay, so did I do the wrong end? I did. Ooh. Guys are getting me too excited.
How deep do you usually score?
It's a nice little scratch.
Yeah. Oh.
So when you're doing this, are you in pure silence at home, just listening to the birds, or do you play anything?
I listen to NPR more than I want to admit.
Nothing wrong with that.
Well, I think it would be spiritually more evolved if I listen to music more, but my hands get goopy, and I like to choose my own music, so I have an old CD player on my computer, and it just gets to be one more thing, and so I end up listening to news until I start thinking, okay, this is hurting my psyche. So, hopefully, we can make this piece forget that ever happened.
Do you have a preference on thickness for your slabs?
I do. I would say that 1/4 of an inch is kind of a lot for me. So sometimes, it's 1/4 of an inch or less when it's a smaller piece. Okay, I'm going to push on this a little, so hopefully it won't. Okay, there you go. And you do want the piece to sit. So there's nothing more irritating than when you finish doing one of these little things and then it kind of goes, so we'll check that. Pretty good. And we've knocked up the lid a little bit, but not terribly. But I do like the rim to sort of have a nice round. Not always, but then this part is kind of the fun part. So this is getting pretty stiff, but on the other hand, it makes life easier in some ways. Because you might want to shape the lid a little bit. It's too squishy. So I'm going to roll it just a little. Because that sometimes makes it seem a little softer. Pulls the water to the surface a little bit.
Would you ever, like if you were, say you forgot about a piece that you were planning to attach and it got to, well, not like bone dry, but drier than you'd want, that would be like your main approach, or would you ever add any water or anything like that?
I will sometimes add water if I'm trying to persuade something to bend and it's starting to crack a little. I'll add water on either side. But generally I don't try to wet my slab. I just make another one. This slab has got like a little bit of a ridge in it, but I'm not quite sure where that came from, but I'm going to smooth it as much as I can. It may be that that surface isn't completely flat.
Oh, this is wedging time.
It could be. I mean, it's fine, but I'm getting some interesting pattern. Didn't expect. Okay, so this is the part where I go, oh boy, now what? And so for me, you know, as I say, I'm trying to make someone have a box that when they look at it from every side, it's a little different. And I think about it maybe as like a little house. So, you know, you might want to have some overhang, and you might want to have a curve. You know, you might not want to be totally symmetrical. So, and I have a slinky that I look at sometimes, because if you look at how a slinky you hang at the edge, there's a beautiful curve. You know, so you always want to have, and this may or may not be a beautiful curve, but what you're looking for is a curve that has some spring, some energy. And I sometimes think that it's a little unfriendly of me to make these boxes that people don't know how to open. So I'm lately trying to maybe give them like a little bit of a pointer so that this might line up with that a little bit. I mean, I call them puzzle boxes, but some people don't want an extra challenge. Okay. So then you might, if your slab would cooperate, you might want to go like this a little bit, just to give it a little bit of a dome, or more, depending. Once you do that, though, you have to make sure that it's still sitting. And the edges are a little bit funky, so we want to fix those first. And I'm being fairly firm. What?
I was saying, what type of work surface do you have in your studio that you?
I have a table that's covered with canvas, so I can roll on it, and I can do that on it. And then I have another table or two that are plain.
Wood? Or?
They're plain, just wood, and I have I have lots of windows in my studio, so I have to block off the windows when I'm taking pictures, but I do have a backdrop that's set up all the time that hangs from, and so it's always there, and then if I'm ready to shoot, I can just pull it out so that it comes back. Never hurts to take trouble with edges.
What kind of sponge is that?
It's an elephant ear sponge, and I just have lots of them.
It was really nice to use.
Okay. So you might want to think about fact that this edge is a little bit funky, and I will clean it up at some other point. But as best I can. But you're also thinking, or I'm also thinking, how are you gonna get the lid off? And you might wanna have like a little handle. A lot of times lately I'm doing kind of the lazy thing, which is make it so that I put cutouts so I can lift it like that. That's a little bit, my hand is a little small. This lid is a little bit big for that, but I don't want to belabor this too much because this is the hard part. So then you have this lovely thing, right? And it's ready to really become a lid. And yes, this needs to be cleaned up a little bit, but I really want to show you guys this because this is the wicked part. What I do is I draw a line for myself around the edge of the rim. Because then I have to make a flange. I don't have a whole lot of proof in this thing, but I don't want to lose whatever I've got, so I'm not going to put this on totally. I'm going to put on a surface that has a little bit of give. And so then you need to find something that will hold the lid in the jar. So you have this nice, it's not completely soft. This is really soft. It's not too thick, and so then you're going to smooth it out. And I've learned that this piece is going to shrink, usually more than that piece. And this is a little dry, but this is drier. So you don't necessarily, I have this rim that's probably that thick. It's a 1/4 inch thick. So you might think, okay, the edge of the flange is going to be here. That is what reason tells you. Reason would be wrong. You want to make it a little closer to the edge than you think, or else you'll end up with a lid that slides around, which you really don't want. And I'm kind of compulsive about it. I want the lid to fit. So then, you don't necessarily have to make the flange come all the way to this edge and all the way, you don't have to do every single piece of this real estate. But at least one of the edges needs to come pretty close to make it tight here. And then you need to make it tight at the front too. So I'm going to score this in sort of an approximate way, closer to the edge than I think I should. You watch, this time I'll make it so close to the edge that the thing won't flow.
Has it been past that where it doesn't fit and you just file it down some more?
Doesn't usually work too well.
Okay.
Sometimes I fire them separately, and then one of them will change shape a little. Really aggravating.
So
And
there's no fix to it?
Well, I have tried filing a little bit then. And 50% of the time I can make it go. But then you have a piece of clay that looks like it's been sanded, which is so fire them together. I mean, it's a drag because then you can't put glaze all the way up to the edge. But that's just the way it is. I mean, that's what I do. There may be a better way, but I leave this unglazed and the top ½ inch of the inside unglazed.
So you fire it with the top on it?
I do.
And it doesn't bend or anything?
Not if I fire them together. You know, if I fire them separately, they will, you know, they might, somebody might change a little. So I've learned to fire them together.
So it's fine to have it closed and to fire them?
Yeah, I mean, you have to be careful. No glaze.
Right. So
No glaze. You know, you have to be a little careful. But you know, I was sort of thinking about this because I was glazing one of these lids before I came over, and I was like, this is very painstaking. I hadn't done it in a while, and I would say that this is, you know, not a good product if you wanted to make a living.
So when you fire and close and then it's bisque, does it shrink even more after it's bisque and then fire?
Yeah.
Oh, it does?
Yeah, it shrinks more. I mean, I think it shrinks the most when it dries, but it shrinks some in the bisque, I think.
Oh, yeah, that's what I meant. But then does it shrink even more in the next firing? When you glaze
No,
it?
not for me, because I fire a bisque fire oddly to 08, which I think no one else in the world does.
Yeah.
But I fired at 08 and then I fired to 04. So it's the difference between the clay at 04 and 08, at least with this clay, I don't notice. Okay, so I have this beautiful thing, and I hopefully have nice edges on here. I don't have nice edges here yet. I've scored them both. This is bendable but not totally squishy. And so I'm going to put that onto the top. And again, I'm going to go a little closer to the edge than I think I should.
Would you mind sliding the water bowl?
Oh, I'm sorry, sure. I thought of that before and then I gave up. That is a problem with making something so small for you guys. I'm sorry about that. Okay. So I have this, and I'm going to, and I think it's pretty good. And so I'm going to hold it, give it good support, and I'm going to squish it every centimeter of the way.
And you have it just inside the line?
It's about 1/8 of an inch.
Okay.
You must have been making these for a long time to kind of have that intuition or that gut feeling of the dryness of the two of them to kind of know that wiggle room. Yeah.
I don't always get it right, but yeah, I've been, when I look back on it, I've gotten pretty good at this judging the flanges. So where it's going to really want to separate is at the two ends. Maybe that there's a physical explanation. I don't know. It's just the truth. So you want to really, and then it looks really ooky. So clean it up. That's just part of it.
So not going all the way around, is that a design choice or?
It's easier. And it doesn't matter. You know, you don't really need the flange to be, what you really need is it for it to be a really good fit, not rattle around. But, you know, I used to do this whole thing and it's a pain in the neck. So really, what I'm worried about with this is like, I may have taken care of the back and forth, this to this, because this is pretty close. But I haven't taken care of any of this. So I need to be sure to cover that part with the next piece. But I can also kind of give myself a little bit of a break and start, you know, leave a little bit of a gap. And I think it actually looks fine. But again, you have to have something over here. And you know what, if I've been lazy and I haven't covered some piece of this real estate and I need to go back in and put something there, I can do that.
I think it gives it more character having two pieces instead of a complete flange.
I think it's good, yeah. And I'm not, I like it if these pieces are relatively the same height, but I just eyeball it. You do want to be sure with the flanges that it's, you know, you could get tempted to make this really thin, but it's easier to make a good attachment if there's a little more clay to clay. So that's not where you want to use the scrap of clay that's just left over that's a millimeter thick. And you can also sort of have a design choice about whether these are angled. You know, once I get them angled, I keep them. I mean, it's like this side, but we're not doing that here.
Speaking of scraps, how do you handle reclaim?
I just do it every once in a while. Oh yeah, so this is thinking about, oh, I'm kind of gonna have to be bendy. But I think it's better if you mix sort of new with old. You know, if you just use scraps. And it shouldn't really matter with my work because it's all a slab. You know, if you have trimmings and then you're building, but I'm a little superstitious. I like to mix my scrap with new. Oh, I made it too long. I'm being more thorough. Okay. So we're further with that. Okay, I'm getting a little itchy with this because I want to show you something else if there's time. Oh, good. And this part does require a little bit of patience. Okay.
Have you worked outside of clay?
I haven't. I don't do anything outside of clay. Next lifetime.
you're exerting downward force mainly on the two sides.
Mm-hmm. I'm pinching and I'm pushing down, and I'm pushing from the bottom.
Is that enough? Like you don't need to smooth out where it meets?
Yeah.
That just you don't need
No,
to
I do.
Oh, you do?
I will. But for now, you know, that is like collateral damage or whatever. From the, you know, that messiness is a necessary byproduct of my pinching and squeezing. And before I get it, so I do both inside and outside. And then before we decide, okay, this is it, we'll see if I have too much flange and I need to squish it in or something. Yeah, a little too much. I want a little stray, I think. Looks like this line, when I made the tracing, it went a little bit astray. Okay, so let's see.
Could you shave the inside and the top if you had to?
I guess you could. My problem at the moment is that somehow or other, the way I place the lid, this little fin is protruding.
Wasn't there before?
I think I had the lid, the original intent was that the lid was going to be a little bit more that way. But the flange is where it is. It would be very much easier if I just did a little surgery. So I'm going to take my knife and I'm going to just try to make a nice clean line. It doesn't have to be straight in the sense of right angle, but it needs to look presentable and straight, not too wobbly.
What's the line for?
The line is where I'm going to trim this fin because it's poking out under my lid and I don't want it to. I made the lid a little bit off. So now this fin is not saying this pokey corner should be somewhere else. You know, my original intent was to have it line right up straight, but I went astray. And so it's perfect. Okay, so then you would want to think about this with a great sigh of relief and sort of say, okay, it has a lid. The lid fits. Some of the edges are a little funky, and these definitely need to be smooth. And, you know, you could leave the line that I made to show me where that was, because that's gonna be where your glaze doesn't go, inside that. So you could leave the line. I tend to kind of erase it as I'm cleaning it up and then just worry about where I'm gonna put the glaze later. And you want these edges to be smooth. The other thing that is worrying me a little bit, and I sort of feel as if when I get into trouble, that's when I get interested. So, that raggedy, you know, you could choose to, first of all, you clean this up, but you could choose to punch holes in here.
Where do you like to show your work?
I like to
Outside of
show
the
my
GACA
work
tour, of
in
course.
places that are architecturally lovely. Which means that the list is short. I do like showing my work at my house. The studio tour is just great as far as I'm concerned. Because I have shelves and I have a porch and I have all my work around it. My house is interesting architecturally. But I'm kind of in a place where for a while I was sort of thinking anywhere I can show, having just retired, I want to. And now I'm sort of at a different spot where I'm thinking I'm not going to live forever. I want to make the work that I want to make. And if it's someplace that I think is not, I mean, this sounds, well, it sounds sort of arrogant, but if I think it's not up to the level of my work, I don't want to show there. So that makes the list very short. I'm trying to work on like I would show, I would love to show in the new small space at Big Medium. I think it's a nice, interesting space. The woman who curates it, not the big space, I'm not being greedy. And when she knows about, I mean, I would, if I could show there, I'd be happy.
Where is that?
It's on South Congress.
And what's it called?
It's called Big Medium.
Oh, Big Medium.
And they show art generally. It used to be, you know where Canopy is on Springdale? It's a big arts complex that used to be factories. And so Big Medium kind of oversaw that, and they had gallery space there, and now they have a new space on South Congress, just below Ben White. And it's in a, you know, funky old shopping complex, and the space is nice, and the work is smart, and but ta-da! Now, we would go through and so now we can put this here and it'll just sit right up. If I decide to keep this piece, I will go around the bottom and clean up any of that extra stuff and then smooth the bottom. But I want to show you one other thing. And we'll have to decide, oh, there's part of this that I didn't clean. We'll have to decide whether there's going to be cutouts to make it something that a person can pick up. So questions about a box? Gonna go run right out and make one?
what does your drying process look like?
I usually, if I'm a little worried that the stuff is uneven, like the top is wet, I will lay out a piece of plastic on the board, put the piece on there, put the lid on, wrap the whole thing, and then put another layer of plastic, let everybody sort of settle for 24 hours. And then I just start lifting the plastic off. And it usually dries for about a week, which I think is generous, but I'm cautious.
Over once you just let it dry.
What?
Otherwise you just let it dry.
I always cover it.
You always do.
Do you cover it until it's like fully bone dry then, or the?
I start lifting the plastic off. So, the first day, the first night, everybody is covered and covered again, and then the next day, I will take off the top covering, uncover it, pull out the plastic from the bottom, and then just leave it draped on top.
So first night you don't spray it?
Mm-mm. Do you?
Yeah. But I'm a super novice.
Well, if you know something I don't know, I'm all over it. Okay, ta-da! But I did want to show you something even more complicated. This is thinking about being a bottle boat, the way I was showing you. And so I made this yesterday, and this table is really deceptively good for drying. All right, so here is what might be the side. And I may not go through as much smoothing of the surface of this as I usually do, but I might. Okay, so when I make a bottle boat, I make both sides the same. More or less.
You call it a bottle boat?
Yeah, I think that it looks like a boat.
Yeah.
And then I put something up here that looks like a neck. And so I think it's sort of a bottle.
Oh, cool.
But it kind of has to do with me imagining that I'm going to make something functional that sort of drifts off into being something else.
So you had a gorgeous piece in the art hop. It was really large. Do you normally make pieces that large?
I like to, yeah. Thank you. And it was white and it was a bottle, yeah. Those, yeah. I was happy to kind of get back this summer to making things that were a little bigger. Okay, so I have this tool that somebody gave me, and it has a little wire, and it cuts the edges at a certain angle. Now, if you don't like the angle, you have to adjust. But it's a little bit quicker. we have an end point?
9.
Okay, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
I just thought, oh. Is it 8:30 and I'm going home? Okay. So this means that I have already determined how these two things are going to go together. If you want a different edge or a different angle, you need to cut your angles yourself. This doesn't seem like it's exactly right, but we will so draw. And that tool has like little pokey, so it's a little bit more efficient. And I'm not worried about whether I'm scoring on the inside or the outside, because this is never going to be seen inside, so I can be a little messy. And a little careless, because this is just for you. Just demo, I'm not going to keep it. Think about keeping it. So the handy thing when you're building a piece out of slabs, and this is the thing that's really the hardest for me, is to roll the slabs. It's a little dry. And get them so they'll stand up.
Do you ever use molds?
I don't. I admire people who can. I mean, you know, when I was growing up as a potter, we thought molds and casting was bad. And now I think, you know, I should enter the new world and think about whether that would come in handy for me, but no, I haven't. Okay, so this is where we're trying to go. And so you build this piece, and then of course, you're gonna really smush all these together very, very well.
Do you ever like drape it on things to allow them to dry to shape?
I haven't. Although I make square plates, and I roll out a slab and put a circle of foils and I drape that on there and squish it. That's as much draping as I do. Okay, so I wanted to show you how to begin this thing. And so what I did, let's start this yesterday, and then this afternoon I put the base on. And I don't drape, but I prop. So I have pieces of foam that will discourage this piece from separating from here, and to be really sure, I'm going to score. Let me see if I can turn it so you guys can see better. I'm going to score this and put a foil in, because this really is not what the clay wants to do. I just bent it.
I'm sorry, the boat portion of it, the rectangle shapes are fully there and the base is then
This was
pressed into that?
this thing?
Yeah.
That was a rectangle.
Yeah, so
So-
did you shave any of that portion off in order to get that base?
Oh, no, I didn't. Good
Oh,
question.
okay.
No. And what I did is sort of what I'm gonna show you now is I had it the other way. So I made this and then I had a piece of clay
You put it on top?
that I went like that. And so it dried going like that.
You don't really use paintbrushes or anything like that. You just fingers and
Mhm.
minimal tools.
Yeah. Not. My go-to isn't, is there a tool that will do this? It's not because I don't think it's a good thing, just because it's not my first one. And I did put coils on the inside of these things. And you can be sort of a little messy doing this. What you're trying to do is make sure that this and this have something holding it together, but you're going to take away some of it.
I'm just impressed you don't have like towels to dry your hands. I mean, like I'm constantly like I've got towels all over the place and they're covered in dust and
Yeah,
crap.
I have that. I mean, I do have my pants. I mean, I thought about that. I mean, I wore these specifically. Because I thought, I don't know.
The clay won't show. It's the same color.
So then I put the coils, I've done it a little sloppily, and then I'm just gonna take my fingernail and go like that. Subtract. And subtract a little bit more.
And you said you put coils on the inside as well?
I do.
How did you manipulate them?
Well, I did it, I mean, there is the turning upside down and doing it. So this is a little bit narrow because the clay is a little stiff and I can't pooch it out too much, but I just put one this way and put one that way and then I turned it over.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant where you're putting them now on the outside and put them on the inside.
Oh,
The
no.
bottom. You meant
That would be
Meant
admirable,
vertical.
but I don't know how to do
Yeah.
that.
That's what I thought too.
Oh, sorry. No, that's why, when I put, if I put this on top of this, I would really push hard, to make that, because I don't have an opportunity to do it on the inside. And so I have to use force a little bit.
You can use a long tool.
she doesn't like tools.
Not on that because it's enclosed or
Yeah.
molded.
She's not good with tools, let's put it like that. Okay. So then, we will skip this side for now, because we want to see if this is going to go on top of this. And again, for me, that's kind of like, I've done all this work, and now I get to have the fun part. keeping in mind that there probably will be a hole in this and a neck coming out of it. So it really is not very nice. We probably are going to need to make the top have a little bit more of curve, a little bit more life in it. If we can.
So do you have a pretty firm idea when you get started what you want it to look like, or do you just kind of let it figure itself out as you go?
Well, I have some idea. You know, I know I'm doing this, you know, I know the basic form, but I'm kind of reactive. So if this comes out to be the shape it does, this responds to it, and then this responds to that.
So you never really know what you're going to end up with.
I don't know. Or be willing to figure it out as you go.
Yeah.
I mean, I sort of feel as if the way I work, and I don't think it's the best way to work, it's just the way I work, is I sort of, I have an idea, I get a certain way with the idea, then I think, this isn't quite working, now what?
Yeah.
And I like that now what part best.
You're not stuck in a box.
So I'm gonna, this is a little bit dry. So I'm a little, I don't want it to misbehave, but I also don't want a flat top exactly. So I think to try to make it do too much in the way of curving this way is risky, but I feel a little more confident about making it bend that way. But in order to keep that, I'm gonna and this will squish down, so I'm overstuffing it a little. You know, I twist this. Hello? Are we chatting or are we not chatting? Okay, so I'm not sure about whether this is it better. Okay. So what I want is for this to be straight. I don't want this to be wiggly. I don't mind if the two ends. But you know, you want your edges always to be kind of look as if they know what they're doing. Okay. So then you sort of have something going, and this part is really awful. You once again are going to draw a line. And it's not awful in the sense that you have to draw a line. It's awful in the sense that you have to remember how to get the thing back on. You know, I'm going to take this off, and then I'm going to score it, and then I'm like, okay, now which?
I have a suggestion.
Oh, good.
So when I'm attaching something in that way, what I do is I get, like I would get the boat shaped piece, I would get the top wet, and then it'll like make a mark, but it also kind of, when you put the next piece back on, it almost has like like you can feel it with your hands.
Oh, that's a
when
good
it
idea.
gets to the
Make a mark with the water, you mean?
Yeah.
So it grabs.
So like I just I'll like rub water over.
Like that?
Yeah.
Good idea. Because, yeah.
And then, like, you can just feel it when it gets on the right spot. I don't know. I hope it works for you. It makes that part of your process more enjoyable.
I hope so too. That would be fabulous. Because, yeah, there is a certain amount of turning it upside down, blah, blah, blah. You know, you can flip it, but it, especially if the piece is, you know, I'm working bigger. I end up, you know, misplacing this thing or this thing, and then I have to do scrubbing off of the scoring, which, you know, I can do, but it's not my favorite. So you don't score it, or you do?
No, I do. Unless if I'm using porcelain, I don't.
You leave the plastic in there when you bar it?
No, I'm not gonna. And in fact, I'll show you something really funny.
Well, aren't you gonna poke a hole in the top?
Pull it out.
Say that again?
Aren't you gonna poke a hole in the top?
I am. That's the really funny part. That's not too bad. Well, we'll call that perfect. Okay, so then what I do now is I'm holding the slab with one finger and my thumb, and I'm pushing down, and I'm moving along the edge, pushing down pretty hard. I'm gonna have a little trouble here because this part is too wide. And I don't mind my finger work here shows, although I need to make sure that it shows over here too. Okay, so then we may not have time to put the neck on, but we have time to make a hole. And that's the funny part. So you may want to think about a circle. It has to be big enough that you can get the plastic out. And so that, in that way, this is a little bit pushing it. You know, ordinarily this would dry overnight. Next day I'd come in and make the hole, pull out the plastic, put it in the neck. But
Live dangerously.
exactly.
Like a giant Kleenex.
Right. Now the thing about it is that this hole is right up against the wall, and this one is a little, not so much. So I'm going to take a little bit more up here. And for my next magic trick.
If a rabbit comes out, I'll be impressed.
That's certainly full of.
So, got a little messy. What I would do with this one, I think, would be to give this a little bit of height here by pushing out from the inside. And a little of that same thing. So it has a little bit more volume. And then I would clean this edge a little bit. And then I would think, gee, maybe I have like a really soft slab. Is it too soft? And I used to try to make a circle, or like a
cone,
like a neck for a bottle. And now I decided that it's not really a bottle. Doesn't really have to do that. Has to have nice edges. but that there's, I mean, I guess what you can see is that I'm trying to make it clear that this thing is built in pieces. You know, it's a construction project in some ways. So it would be nice if I could make a beautiful neck, but not necessary. So I could just fake it, and it would be even better. So what I do, and I do this, I come up with some pieces, and I have the, you know, there's like about this much overhang inside the bottle, so that I can be sure that I have, you know, so the hole has to be big enough, and the amount underneath the edge of the hole has to be deep enough that I can really make a good attachment. And I'm just going to show you. I'm not going to do it. Just gonna...
Have you ever had a piece fall in and not be able to get it out? I know I would.
No, but what happens is, you know, the pieces will, trimmings will go down in and have this big thing that I was glazing today, and I'm shaking it, you know, it's upside down, shaking it. I can't get the pieces to come out. I'm like, well, I hope the glaze anchors them, because they don't seem to be coming out. Anyway, a little less. I won't finish it because I know we all have places to go, but I would do something like that. And so in a way, as somebody who likes abstraction, in the back of my mind, and I don't expect anybody else to see it that way, you know, I'm making a vase and these are the flowers. And so they're a little bit fragmented, but that's what I'm doing. So there you have it.
Thank you, Margaret. Again, if anybody needs to pay Bob, he's there. If you have any questions about anything, come see me. I'll be here for a little bit longer. Have a good day.
Thank you. You're great.